All right, my fellow chess morons, today we take one step closer together to becoming chess masters. This is the third video in the series of chess positions you must know. This is an endgame position, which is a lot of the positions we're going to be studying. Endgames are super, super important. This is called the square of the pawn. This describes a king-pawn endgame scenario. So what a lot of chess players do that are somewhat new to the game is they see a position like this. This is black to play. They ask themselves, well, is this pawn going to be able to promote, or is the black king going to, sorry, really bad line, catch it? And what they start doing is they start just calculating in their head, like, okay, if I go here, he goes here. If I go here, they go here. If I go here, they go here. If I go here, they go here. Which is not technically wrong. There are some endgame scenarios in which you're going to need to go move by move to sort of see where the pieces end up. But the square of the pawn is an attempt to simplify that calculation process, to use a visual trick to determine whether the king can reach the pawn. So conceptually, the concept of square of the pawn is to simplify calculation into a visual trick. The trick is this. We are going to, let me get my handy dandy little step one here. We're going to go to the pawn. We're going to make a visual line, sorry, a diagonal line, can also be visual, to the end of the board. We're then going to go and create a square in this manner. If the king can enter this square, then the king will reach the pawn. So let me repeat that. If the king can enter the square of the pawn, the king will be able to reach the pawn at some point before it reaches a8. And this would be true no matter where the pawn is on the board, with one exception, which we'll get to in a second. So if this was white to play, actually, let me start with black. If this is black to play, since the king can enter the square, it can go to any of these three squares, and this will be a draw. It'll be a draw because the king will reach the pawn. So for example, here, 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 and this is a draw. Notice that the king can also enter here. It might look a little funny, but it does technically reach. This is a draw. But if I were to play here, for example, the king no longer reaches. And one way of visualizing that is if I were to play, here and the pawn goes here, we have a new square of the pawn. The new square of the pawn is this set of squares, which I've already drawn. So step one is to visualize the square of the pawn, or if you're in a game like online, I guess you can literally draw it. You won't be able to do that over the board. I don't think your opponent would allow that, but if you're online, you might be able to do it. And the second question to ask is, or the first question to ask, but second step is, can the king enter the square? Okay, real quick instant replay. Create the square and ask ourselves, can the king enter it? So if this were white to play, white would win. We already did that. And if it's black to play, black can draw. This seems pretty basic, but it's really, really important. It comes up all the time, and a lot of players aren't going to fully understand it, especially more beginner players. There's one exception to this, and the exception stems from the fact that in chess, pawns on their starting squares can move two squares. So if you're wondering why there's an exception to this, there's an exception to a lot of things in chess, which is one of the things that makes the game so beautiful and complex. But in this situation, notice that, I did that in the wrong way. Sorry, we'll do the diagonal. We will create this square. This is a pretty big square because the pawn is on a2. Notice that the black king is in the square of the pawn. And if white were to play a3, black would catch it because it's in the square of the pawn, right? It would happen at the last second, and this would be a draw. However, because white has the option, or not white, but any pawn on the initial rank, so on the second rank or seventh rank, if this board were flipped, if we were going this way and the pawn were here, you know what I mean, you get my point. Where did my board flip go there? Sorry about that. Because white has the option in this situation to play two squares forward instead of one, now notice that black cannot reach the square of the pawn on this move. And so despite the fact that technically black is within the square of the pawn for this move, it still can't reach it because of this two this 2-square promotion rule. So now if white plays like this, sorry, if black plays like this, we will not reach it, and this will be a win for white. Okay, I hope this makes sense. I know it's a short video. It's pretty basic and straightforward, but it's extremely important. It's going to come up all the time. So definitely something to understand thoroughly. Play around with it a little bit on Lichess or wherever, and make sure you understand the way sort of the pieces relate in this. Really, really important to understand. I hope it makes sense. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm trying to grow the channel. Any likes, comments, subscribes, all the chess things or all the YouTubey things you could do, I would really, really appreciate it. And any feedback. I hope these videos are helpful. Learning all this was extremely helpful for me, and it has made my journey way more efficient, I guess you could say, learning these sort of conceptual ideas. So I hope the same happens to you. All right, have a good one.